Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. It is 5-Year Battle, Agatha Christie, 1926 through 1930. Let's get started. The first 5 years, 1921 through 25, were kind of just a slow start for her. Slow start, I believe she published 6 books. But the books weren't quite up to the level that we are going to see that she is able to get. But 26 through 30, she really pumps up the output for one, and two, I think she definitely powers up the quality. The first book she published in 1926 was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, long known as one of her best books, generally thought of. Also, one of the biggest twist endings, even though many people may know it, I'm not going to spoil it for it. But it's a Hercule Poirot book about the murder of a Roger Ackroyd. It is narrated by a doctor in a small village. There's no Hastings, which automatically a good thing for me. It is a book that really kind of broke the rules of mysteries at the time. And some of the stuff in the book seems commonplace now, but we have to remember that it wasn't then. And I think even if you read it now, especially if you read it not having encountered Christie before, or especially if this was one of your first mysteries, I think it still hits. I think it still hits, and I've read it multiple times. I know who the killer is. I know what to expect, and just think it still hits. And there are few Christie books that do that, where multiple readings still hit as hard. Not as hard, but pretty close to as hard as the first time. Obviously, it's first book. It's going to be number one. I'll be honest, there's a very good chance it's going to be number one by the end, but we shall see. The Big Four, also a Hercule Poirot book, published in 1927. Hastings is in this, not a good sign. It was originally written as 11 short stories. It's more of a kind of international intrigue novel. It's really weird to have this as a Poirot novel because it doesn't stand well next to all the other Pearl books. It's almost like this should be, I don't know, like a superintendent battle, or even possibly Tommy and Tuppence. It would make more sense for them. But it's Pro, and it's bad. It's not good. It's like politics and international intrigue, and I just don't think Christie generally does that well, especially with Pro in it. Uh, there's an Asian character in here, which is pretty much what you would expect from Agatha Christie writing an Asian character. Obviously, this is number two for me. I do not like this book at all. I really dislike it, especially being a Pro book. Book number three, third Pro book in a row. The Mystery of the Blue Train, published in 1928. Another novel that doesn't have Hastings in it. A few years down the road, we're not going to have to worry about saying it doesn't have Hastings in it, because it's going to be just no Hastings for a long while. But right now, we're still in the might have Hastings. Characters don't really stand out in here. I don't think the mystery particularly stands out. There are some red herrings, and there are some tropes that, unlike in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I don't think they work very well in here. and I don't know how they were accepted at the time this was published. They're eye rolling, and I will say that this is at one point. I don't know when she said this, but at one point, Christie said this. This was her least favorite novel. I, I can understand that, but I still have to put this above the Big Four. Big Four is really bad. Then we have The Seven Dials Mystery. This was also published in 1928. It brings back some characters who were in the Secret of Chimneys, including Superintendent Battle. It's sort of a mystery novel, sort of an intrigue novel. I was doing a little bit of research on the book, and the book was not particularly well reviewed when it was published, or even years later. But I like it, so I don't know what to tell you. I yeah, there's some cheesy moments, like especially that final table scene. Which, if you read it, you know what I'm talking about. That does seem pretty cheesy and over the top, but I still like the characters. I like Battle. I like the male and female leads. It works. Now, if like Perot had been in this, I don't think it would have been the type of novel for Perot. It, it's more like the Big Four. Superintendent Battle would have been better in the Big Four, but I like this one. It's in second place right now. It's overall it's a good read. It's a fun read. It's not a great read, but it's a fun read. I I, I liked it. Then 1929, Partners in Crime, Tommy and Tuppence book. Now, this is a little ridiculous. Uh, Tommy and Tuppence, they've been married 6 years now at this point. They are put into a detective agency, running a detective agency uh, by the government in order to um, intercept any enemy messages. How? Why? Who knows? But that's it. The stories themselves are all essentially parodies of detective or mystery stories of the times. The problem that we have is like most of them, at least I've never heard of them. Like, there's a parody of Sherlock Holmes, sure. Father Brown, definitely heard of. I haven't read any of them yet. Even Hercule Poirot, but there are other ones like I don't know the author. I don't know the detective that they're parodying. The mysteries themselves aren't particularly clever. The solutions aren't particularly clever. Tommy Lord Loveham isn't particularly clever and does some ridiculous things in order to get into the mind of the detective he's deciding to emulate in each story. But uh, I love Tommy and Tuppence. I do. They're not detectives. I like this book, but they're just not detectives. And so if you go into this book as I'm going to read about these characters and see how they get themselves out of this mess that they put themselves into, then it's a good book. If you're going into this book as I want a good mystery and to see an able detective figure out what's going on, these are not the stories for you. But again, I like Tommy and Tuppence. I'm gonna put them just below the Seven Dials mystery. I get the feeling that that's probably there are five Tommy Tuppence books. That's probably gonna be the pattern. They're gonna be somewhere in the middle, probably. Tommy and Tuppence are good characters. The material they're in just don't match the characters. Book number 6, published in 1930, is The Murder at the Vicarage. It is the first Miss Marple novel. It is the first Miss Marple published in a book. There were short stories published years earlier, but they weren't collected in a book until 1932. So, to most of the public, this is their first exposure to Miss Marple. Unlike most Miss Marple books, she doesn't play as large a role in this book as she does in others, and she doesn't come across as much kindly old lady as she does in other books. She's a little bit sharper in here, and I don't mean intelligence wise. She's intelligent in every book, but she has more edges in this book than she does in later books, which I'm fine with. Uh, so, a Colonel Prothero is killed at the vicarage. His wife was having an affair, something that the vicar learns inadvertently. So she's a suspect. Her lover is a suspect. Of course, there are many other suspects. I have to say, I really, really like this book. I don't think the murder is especially intriguing, or the suspects, or any of that. The reason I like this book is because of the narrator. The narrator is the vicar, Reverend Clement. In I don't often use this word, but he's just lovely. He's a lovely man, and I loved reading his narration. Now I will say, reading The Murder at the Vicarage after having read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I was nervous for reasons I won't explain. But if you read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, you probably know why I was nervous. But just a fun read. I love the character of the vicar. I'm going to put this at number 2, and it's all based on the vicar. Book number 7, Giant's Bread, published in 1930, written under the pseudonym of Mary Westmacott. It is not a mystery. It's about a guy named Vernon Deer, kind of his life up until he's 20. Uh, he decides that he wants to be a composer after not liking music at all before he was 20. And then it's also about his relationship with a couple different women, and it's depressing. I get the feeling that all the Mary Westmacott books are going to be depressing. Vernon's not a particularly appealing character. Honestly, none of the characters in here are appealing. There are a couple of characters I think who are supposed to be very appealing to us, but they're just annoying. And you can kind of sense, even though they don't say it, that they think they're better than everyone. And it's like, no, you just happen to be in a book written after the end of World War I, so that Agatha Christie can say, "Oh no, he knew it was going to happen." It's like, no, you're a jerk. I don't like you. Um, this book also contains probably the best representation of a Jewish character that you will find in an Agatha Christie book. That is faint praise because it still comes across as a little bit anti-Semitic. Um, Honestly, with the Jewish character being such a prominent part of it, it just stands out more, even though the anti-Semitism isn't as bad as in other novels. I'm going to rank this above the Big Four and The Mystery of the Blue Train, but it's still not a good novel. Okay, so we have one more book. We have two more books technically, but one of them is The Road of Dreams, which is a book of poetry published in 1930, I believe. Uh, it is not available, and I've also said in last week's video that I'm not going to be doing the poetry. So, but I do want you to know that it was published in this time. I'm sure if you want to read Agatha Christie poetry, a little internet searching will probably find it. So the last book that we have is The Mysterious Mr. Quin, published in 1930. It is a collection of short stories about Mr. Harley Quinn. Um, in Mr. Satterthwaite, it's hard for me to pronounce it, but it's Satterthwaite. So it almost makes me have to have a lisp. Um, Mr. Satterthwaite doesn't have a first name that we know of. He is an old bachelor. If this wasn't Agatha Christie, I would say that this man is a gay man. Um, he's an old bachelor. He dresses well. He loves theater. Um, loves gardens. He is often described of having feminine qualities. It's quite possible, even with this being an Agatha Christie, that this is a gay character. I view him as a gay character, but his sexuality has nothing to do with the story. So the Mr. Quinn is a younger man who I will just say, to me, he's a supernatural being. He basically kind of comes around and helps people, like in times of crisis, or particularly young lovers. But he also has some darker qualities that we see in later stories. This collection is a collection of short stories. I have to say, there's not a story in this collection that misses for me. Every story is a banger. I love this book. Mr. Satterthwaite is probably my favorite character. We have Hercule Poirot, but we have so many books of Hercule Poirot. And we have this book of short stories plus two short stories in the Harlequin tea set, which we won't get to until we cover like the 1970s. He appears in the Poirot book Three Act Tragedy, and he does a cameo in a short story, I believe, Dead Man's Folly, I think. So he is not a lot of work, but I really love him. I love the stories. There's some mystery. There's supernatural qualities. There's romance in it that is probably some of the best romance. Obviously, not main character romances, but it, it it's almost like showing my age here, but like the Michael Landon show, Highway to Heaven, where basically he goes like every week to help other people. It's like these two characters kind of go every short story to help different people. It's like little episodes for those, and it's just, oh, I love this book. I love this book so much, which is great. Except this book is in the same 5-year period as the murder of Roger Ackroyd. So here's my problem. In this 5-year period, what's the best book? It's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. What's my favorite book? It's The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. All the other books, that's fine. Got them figured out, no problem. But this one, Heart Mind. Uh, Fuck it. I'm gonna put The Mysterious Mr. Quinn number one. Uh, is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd a better book? Overall, if I'm looking at it, ridiculous to say, but if I'm looking at it objectively, yes. But this is subjective. I'm going to put it number one. Um, and I knew I wasn't going to want to put The Murder of Roger Ackroyd over it, but I thought I was going to. So let me see if I got these in the correct order. Uh, Number 8 is The Big Four. Number 7 is The Mystery of the Blue Train. Number 6 is Giant's Bread. Number 5 is Partners in Crime. Number 4 is The Seven Dials Mystery. Number 3 is The Murder at the Vicarage. Number 2 is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And number 1 is The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. Uh, I'll be quite honest. The reason I feel comfortable picking that as my number 1 is one, I love the book. But I also know that The Murder of Roger Ackroyd would not be my number 1 at the end of this. In fact, whatever's going to be my number 1 next week is definitely higher up than The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I mean, next week we have Murder on the Orient Express. And I'm sorry, there's no question for me. That's higher than The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So, number 1, Mysterious Mr. Quinn, which I don't think is going to be anywhere near the top for most people's list. So, please like and subscribe. Please come next week so we can see if I pick Mr. Parker Payne Detective over Murder on the Orient Express. And guess what? I will not pick that over Murder on the Orient Express. But I have 10 books to go over next week, so we'll see if any of them does beat Murder. I will talk to you then.